Strong winds and heavy rain are battering Gaza for yet another day, compounding the hardships faced by Palestinians. Hundreds of thousands of people are sheltering in tents because more than 2 years of Israeli bombardment damaged more than 80% of the buildings in the Strip. Last week, Storm Byron hit, collapsing several ruined houses. At least 14 Palestinians were killed. Tareq Azzoum is in Gaza City. I mean, Tareq, they are extraordinarily distressing scenes, aren't they, of people that have already been through so much, facing the full force of nature with very little to protect them. I mean, what are conditions like there now in the aftermath of all of this?
Well, conditions are extremely dire, and we know that the winter has become another layer of the crisis in Gaza as it's accelerating displacement again. But this time, families whose tents flooded overnight are moving again, looking and searching for slightly higher ground to take it as a refuge. And this is, by the way, very difficult to find these days due to the overcrowded spaces. And we saw how strong winds have uprooted dozens of makeshift tents, in particular in areas that are too close to the coastal enclave. And in many areas, we saw how children were walking barefoot as they were surrounded by pools of water and mud. And this is immediately considered to be as a huge health risk for them, which will trigger further respiratory illnesses and skin infections in areas that in particular are facing severe shortages in terms of medical services. But this morning we start to see how families started to cope with the repercussions of this huge storm that hit Gaza, and for many of them they are still calling for the immediate entry of adequate number of makeshift shelters in order to house those families who have left stranded. And we have been told by the director of Gaza's municipality that there are thousands of families who are right now homeless, without shelter, and even without partially destroyed buildings, in order to take refuge inside and to afford a sense of normalcy and protection for the young children and for the elderly people who have been hugely impacted by the repercussions and the aftermaths of this storm.
And Tareq, given the huge impact, what kind of help is there available for people?
Well, here nothing works the way it should. In fact, we saw how emergency systems have been crippled, government services are choked, and aid agencies are still facing constant restrictions. So families are simply left to fend for themselves, digging trenches, propping up collapsing tents, and in some certain cases they are sharing what's left of scraps of plastics in order to support their fragile tents that have been heavily impacted by the storm here. And for many Palestinians, this is not a crisis that resulted from shortages of resources, but a systematic ban resulted from the Israeli policy to prevent the alleviation of the humanitarian emergency on the ground. So people are still quite skeptical about the next downpour, that either it's gonna take away what's left for them or not. So on the ground, resources are really stretched, and civil defense members are quite concentrating on life-saving emergencies rather than providing infrastructure support. And this comes as a clear result of the wide-scale destruction inflicted upon the equipment, the fuel, and all resources that were used before to be mobilized in order to address the emergency system here in Gaza. So people on the ground are still really struggling to cope with this growing crisis, and they are expecting that more harsh days are ahead, specifically as the peak of the storm will be tomorrow. And for many Palestinians, they started from now on to provide some sort of improvised assistance that is right now taking shape in light of the absence and also the shortage of essential humanitarian needs that were promised to be delivered to Gaza during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement.
All right, Tareq, thanks for clarifying all of that. The peak of the storm, as you say, still to come, considering all that people in Gaza have been through. Tareq Azzoum in Gaza City.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.